Glad you're still with us. It will be 5 years this August since the first coup that triggered a wave of others across parts of Africa. In Niger, Burkina Faso, twice, Sudan, Chad, Guinea, and Gabon. While there's been no new coup since, the ripple effects are far from over. Gabon's coup leader, for instance, formally assumed the presidency in May 2025. In doing so, he broke promises that the military would step aside from politics. In Mali, the ruling junta dissolved all political parties to tighten its grip on power. Across the affected countries, military rulers remain entrenched. Sudan, for its part, has descended into a devastating civil war following its coup in 2021. A postdoctoral research associate whose article on the conversation inspired today's discussion, Dr. Salah Ben Hamour, suggests that the international community must move beyond the view of coups as isolated events. He says coup leaders are not only seizing power, they're learning from one another how to entrench authority, sidestep international pressure, and craft narratives that legitimize their rule. According to him, what these coups have in common is key to defending democracy. So in this second half of One Slot, we will attempt to review his submission on some of the 5 lessons he mentioned: contagion, civil support, international response, among other lessons that could be key to defending democracy on the continent. My guest is one who knows about these things. He's a political affairs analyst and doctor of law at the Enforcement Department, Ministry of Justice, United Kingdom, Dr. Masimba Mavaza. Welcome to the program and thanks for giving us your time.
Welcome, madam, and welcome, viewers.
All right, so the piece that inspired this conversation, I want to quote a bit from it. Dr. Hamour says that just a month after Guinea's military ousted President Alpha Condé, Sudan's army disrupted its democratic transition. 3 months later, Burkina Faso's officers toppled President Kabore amid rising insecurity. He says each case had unique triggers, but the timing suggests more than coincidence. I want you to talk to us about what you feel he is talking about when he says there is this contagion in this instance and what we must learn from it.
Thank you very much. I think the first point we look at is the fact that there has been a wave of coups before these ones. These are the second stage of the coups with a different thing inside. So let's look at what causes these coups in the Eastern Northern Africa. Yes, Southern Africa had a coup for the first time in a long time. That was in Zimbabwe in 2017, which was a coup which we still not call a coup. So it's a coup which is not a coup. But the proper out coups in other countries. There's been 2 major factors which causes these coups. The first one is that the sitting governments, the civilian governments, the presidents, and their entire entourage have become so systematically corrupt as to provoke the anger of the people, to an extent that the people are looking for anything which topples them. So that any coup, whether it is done by a soldier, whether it is done by anybody, people are embracing it. So because people have nowhere else to find hope in their own freedom except in the army. So people now go to the army, ask the army to come in. And again, in most constitutions, there is a clause, depending on the country, which says the army has to step in if they think the country is not properly managed or the country's interests are being trampled. So if you look at this issue, most countries where there have been coups, there have been factors which have triggered this coup. The first one, there was a widespread discontent by the people against those in power at the moment. A widespread corruption, where only the children of those in power are the ones benefiting from the cake of the country. They are using it for themselves. They give each other tenders, they give each other oil, they give each other everything. And any person without a relative in the government gets nothing. So as a result, you don't forget that the majority are not in cabinet. The majority are not presidents. And therefore, when the majority come together and they all have the same problem of being sidelined in their own country, because your country is the only country which you can call yours in the world. We might go and stay in other countries. It doesn't make those countries ours. So as a result of that, the people then would urge the soldiers to move on and do something. So there is a great difference again, which I want the people to look at and you to look at. Most soldiers now are not soldiers who are picked from grade 1, grade 2 in primary schools. They are educated people. They've gone to the universities. They've got their own analytical understanding of the politics. And when he is the source of power, which is a gun, and sees that the country is going into the drain, he can use that gun to implement his own beliefs, his own power, and his own source of power.
Yeah,
Yes,
on the one hand, Doc, he highlighted these things, hoping we can learn lessons from it. And you are corroborating that, saying that these military leaders cannot succeed without civilian support. And sometimes they go as far as inviting these military leaders. But there lies the challenge. When these military dictators come into power, they stay and somehow legitimize themselves. I mentioned a ruler that found a way to transform himself to a democratic leader. How do these coup leaders garner such popular support? What is the continuing implication of this metamorphosis of these military rulers to democratic governance that we should be scared about?
The first thing we must look at is the fact that they are trying to transform themselves. You cannot call them dictators. But however, they don't transform themselves without the support of the people. Because democracy is the rule of the people by the people. So if the people decide to be ruled by the army, it is a democratic rule. It is a democratic decision made by the people, by the majority of the people in that country. But however, most political leaders, when they get into power, they are human beings, don't forget that. When they discover how sweet power is, they are not willing to leave that fast. But we have got military leaders who have gone into power, like President Traore, for example. He has actually done tremendous things so that every other person, every other human being in Africa is wishing that they find one Traore in their army who can take over and act the Traore. So when we look at that, some coup leaders have become better. Some coup leaders have transformed themselves into democrats. We look into Ghana, Rawlings. When he took over by force, he ended up transforming himself into a democratic man, and then he was elected. And he won elections, and when his term ended, he left. May his soul rest in peace. He is late now. Of course, in Ghana, there are some people who still say he was better, and there are some who think he was worse. So we cannot make people happy. And we have got soldiers in different countries where they've taken over so that they can make sure the rot and the corruption in the country should stop. Now, before they know it, they realize that the civilians themselves cannot come up with a better leader who will be divorced from all the corrupt leaders. So they have to buy time until they can find a better leader. But unfortunately, people just think a man in uniform cannot be a Democrat. Soldiers can be Democrats. The only reason why it was discouraged for soldiers to take over power, it will become a problem where everybody with a gun wants to be a ruler. And by so doing, therefore, the democratic ethos of the world will be trembled. But when you look at it, what is democracy? Why do we think democracy means voted into power? We have realized and noticed that so many African countries, people are crying at the results of the elections. The results are appalling. They've been stage managed. There was a lot of vote buying, threats, and everything by the civilians who are not soldiers, using soldiers. So when then the other people outside see that, they think probably there's no need to go to the polls, because even if you go to the polls, you are not going to benefit your right of voting, because your vote is going to be thrown under the trash can, and then they declare the winner of their own choice and not of your choice. And therefore, by so doing, democracy is the wave of these coups by the African soldiers in some of the African states. It's actually a demonstration that the democracy imposed on Africa by the West is not for the Africans. We have our own form of democracy. What we need as Africans is a leader who understands these people, believes in these people, work with these people, and stay as long as these people love him. It does not need us to have so many several political parties and have our elections. We end up having people being voted simply because they were able to manipulate the vote. So we cannot sit here and say once a soldier becomes a president, he's a dictator, or he's transforming himself into a democrat. It means he has got democratic blood in him. And therefore, the fact that he's a soldier does
this is a conversation that we can't. This is a conversation, Doctor, in my view, that we can't even scratch the surface in an hour, not to talk of 15 minutes. And that seems to be even less than what we have left for this conversation. So I'm just going to move to the heart of the submission for today, and that is looking for a way forward. What is the future outlook for democracy in West Africa? Can the region find a way to stabilize and consolidate these gains, or are coups likely to remain a recurring phenomenon?
I think the future of democracy in West Africa is quite bleak. What is happening in West Africa and some parts of Africa is redefining of democracy. We are now going to have something new called military democracy, where a military man is in power and is actually introducing some democratic changes which were not introduced by the civilians. And some military rulers are actually the better rulers, and the economy is actually blooming under them. And so the Western African people are not looking at democratically elected governments by the book of the West. They are looking at the democratically imposed governments by the will of the people.
All right.
So what you see now, just in short, the coups we have these days are different from the coups we had 10 years ago. The coups we have now are all supported by the people of that country, only criticized by the foreigners. So
I guess we still have so much to talk about.
With the will of the people of that country.
I'm sorry to interject. I know we have so much to talk about, but we're out of time for this conversation. Thank you so much, Doctor, for sparing the time to speak to us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.